Dear church family, greetings to you all. Miss seeing you, all of you, and I really hope that everyone is doing well, keeping well and safe, and able to look at the positives in this situation rather than the all too easily seen negatives. Just a couple of reminders before I want to begin a series with you in preparation for Easter. As I record this, I've tried several times and I'm recording it yet again. It's Good Friday today, so I wish you a very happy Good Friday. The sufferings of Jesus, although serious, are the crux and the bedrock upon which our faith rests and our hope is built. So a few things that I know and want to remind you in the midst of all this uncertainty that we still are facing and looks like we will face for a while. I know that God is good. I know that He wasn't taken by surprise in all of this. I also know that we will get through this. And I know that we can take the extra time in prayer and reading and caring for each other. I'm not able to even make personal visits, but I have tried to keep in contact with many church members on the phone and will continue to do so. And if we need to bring things to you, please contact me, and I'd be happy to do that. That's the least we can do, and we want to continue to care for one another. We need to be in prayer for one another, especially for the vulnerable and those isolated and alone at this time without visits. I especially think of those in the nursing homes and possibly even in hospital at this time. Workers too that are high risk, those in poor health, and those need our prayers especially. And I'm going to say something that's very practical and kind of business-wise concerning our church situations. We need to be prioritizing sending in our tithes and offerings as we normally would, that our church can continue to function and its ministries can continue. And although this has never been my focus or priority, and it never will be, we do need to consider the needs of our church. So please continue to give. For example, I know that, at Billings we support the Ministry of Freedom's Rest, and that ministry continues. Although donations have largely dried up and their thrift store in Ozark has been closed down, of course. We also have other needs too, just ongoing needs, ongoing bills of the church. We've got to continue to pay the bills. So please do continue to think about that as we move forward into the future. Who knows how long this is going to be until this ends, or when normalcy will return. Having said all of that, I want to give some messages for Easter, and this may continue beyond Easter Sunday, but I want to do a part one today, and as I see it, there are three essential keys of the Christian faith, all of which are critical and essential. And in my mind, as a visual learner, I picture these three key essentials as a pyramid or a triangle, a strong triangle. When one collapses, the entire structure collapses. The first of these three is the virgin birth of Jesus. Without this, Jesus was like us, sinful, and therefore his sacrifice could not have paid the penalty for us. So virgin birth is absolutely critical. The second of these vitals is simply the death of Jesus for us. This is critical because he came for this purpose. It was not an accident. It wasn't the whim of man that he should die and be crucified. It wasn't Pilate. It wasn't the Romans or the Jews. He took our place. He chose to give up his life. for us. He was our Passover lamb according to 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. So that's the second of these three pinnacles, if you like, the death of Jesus. And the third, of course, is the resurrection. It shows that God forgives sin, that God forgives me. The price has been paid and God has accepted it, and we have hope. Death has been overcome. So those are the three: the virgin birth, the death, and the resurrection. The Passion Week, including Good Friday, Palm Sunday, and Resurrection or Easter Day, is the rock foundation over which the Christian faith stands. It is essential. Easter is not all about bunnies and peeps and eggs and chocolate, although some of those things are enjoyable. It's about Jesus' death, his burial, and his resurrection. It's about how God could and does forgive sin in Jesus. So this message today and my next will be about the true meaning of the Resurrection Sunday and Easter time. First of all, then, the death of Jesus. What does it mean? The week culminating in this whole aspect of the cross takes up between a fourth and a half of the entire gospel records. That shows its importance to us, because it's pretty remarkable the amount of time that the gospels focus on its importance. So we've got Matthew chapter 21 through chapter 28. We have Mark's Gospel from chapters 11 through 16. In Luke, it's chapter 19 through 24. In John, it's all the way from chapter 12 to the end to 21. So why is there so much emphasis here on this Passion Week, the last week, the sufferings of Jesus, as opposed to any other part of his life? Why is there so little on the actual physical birth of Jesus? On the actual physical birth, there's one verse of the scriptures. It's only found in Luke, and it's chapter 2, verse 7. Why is there almost nothing on his childhood, and absolutely nothing on his teenage years? Even though some of us might be curious about that. Well, the answer, I believe, is because Jesus came to die. This was his central purpose. The first part of Passion Week starts with the entrance into Jerusalem. The Passover then follows, and he moves into the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's look at those. The entrance into Jerusalem, the Passover, and the Garden of Gethsemane, very, very briefly. I'm going to focus on those, but in particular the last of those. His entrance into Jerusalem was simple but public. The scriptures record that multitudes followed him. They strewn palm branches on the ground, and therefore it's known as Palm Sunday. Its purpose was primarily, I would suggest, to fulfill prophecy, specifically Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. He is to ride into Jerusalem on a simple donkey. How humble, yet how ironic and typically downplayed was his entrance into Jerusalem. You think about it, the greatest event of all history was about to happen within a week. And the King of Kings, God in the flesh, rides into the city of peace, Jerusalem, where it was to happen, on a simple donkey. Not a white horse. Amazing. Then we have the Passover. I was preparing and I was looking forward to celebrating that Jewish festival with you this year. It's not to be. But it is an amazing festival that Jewish people have celebrated and still celebrate in their homes and have done for over 3,500 years. It's a feast or a festival that points in vivid detail to Jesus the Lamb. Now for our reading, I want to read from Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 onwards. I'll read a few verses here. Matthew in the 26th chapter and verse 36 onwards. Of course, if I could, I'd get you to stand and we could read together, but it's not possible. Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 onwards. It says, Then cometh Jesus with them to a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto his disciples, Sit ye here, while I go and pray. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here and watch with me. And he went a little farther, and fell on his face, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he came unto the disciples, and found them asleep. And he said unto Peter, What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then came he to his disciples and said unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hand of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that does betray me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, the same is he, hold him fast. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they, and laid hands on Jesus, and took him. And behold, one of them which was with Jesus stretched out his hand, and drew his sword, and struck a servant of the high priest, and smote off his ear. Then said Jesus unto him, Put up again thy sword into its place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled, that thus must it be? In the same hour said Jesus to the multitudes, Are ye come out again as a thief with swords and stave for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and ye laid no hand on me. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. From this point onwards, of course, Jesus goes to have his civil trial with the Romans, his religious trial with the Jewish people, be condemned to be suffered in incredible ways. And we might have a chance to look at that, and obviously the cross. But as we look at this aspect, the Garden of Gethsemane was in many ways a centrally key event and focus in Jesus' life. Let me bring you a few thoughts and questions for you to ponder on the Garden of Gethsemane. The word itself means an oil press. And how fitting, as it was here that Jesus came under extreme pressure, and his resolve to pay the penalty for our sin led him to the victory of the cross. The nouns used of Jesus here are unlike anywhere else found in the Bible. For example, exceedingly sorrowful even unto death, we read in the excerpt from Matthew there. Also very heavy, in deepest sorrow, being in agony, Luke chapter 22 verse 44 says. And then Luke also gives us a little bit more detail, as he is prone to doing. He says that as Jesus wrestled in prayer with the Father, sweat was, as it were, great drops of blood falling to the ground. The disciples were commanded to wait and pray, and yet slept for sorrow. 3 times we read this. Jesus was in deep prayer with the Father, and persevering in prayer here led to strength and victory to go to the cross. The opposite being true for the disciples. In other words, they were asleep here and lost their power connection through prayer to the Father, and as a result, they forsook and fled him at the cross. It's a reminder to us, amongst many other things, of how easily we miss the power that's available to us in prayer. Prayer in many ways is a mystery, but it's our connection to the Father. He wants us to talk with him. He wants us to spend time with him. Three times then Jesus prayed for this cup to be removed from him. And yet, of course, he prays, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. What was he praying to be removed from him here? That's a big question. Many commentators say, well, he was praying that the cup to be removed was his sufferings, his death by crucifixion, and ultimately then the cross. But that couldn't be. He came for that purpose. He came to die. He came to suffer. He came to fulfill those prophecies out of all the scriptures, but especially that passage of the suffering servant of Isaiah chapter 52 and 53. He was to be wounded for our transgressions. By his stripes we were to be healed. So if it wasn't the cross and the sufferings that Jesus was praying to the Father to be removed from him, if it was possible, what was it? Well, let me humbly propose to you that I think it was separation from the Father. Something that had never happened through the realms of all eternity. God the Father and God the Son being separated because Jesus took the penalty of your sin and my sin upon him there upon the cross. Maybe that's why I think it is why Matthew's Gospel records the accompanying signs of the death of Jesus, which in part was darkness on the face of the earth. As Jesus stood there suspended between earth and heaven, carrying my sin upon him, God the Father couldn't look upon God the Son. He said if it was possible, let that cup pass from him. But it wasn't possible. There was no other way. To me, this was far worse than any physical torture that Jesus was going to go through for you and for me. And those were considerable, as we will examine this Easter time. I close with a commentating verse. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21, I think it summarizes amazingly this aspect of the importance of the death of Jesus. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, for he hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. That's amazing. That's the mind of God, to give us the only way possible for us to be resolving the sin issue through the action of God in Jesus. That's what Easter is about. That's what the cross is about. And ultimately that is what Resurrection Sunday is about. That's amazing grace, for sure. God bless you and keep you. And I will post again soon.